A very good afternoon to Batra sir. Our speaker has joined. Welcome, sir. Sir, whenever you are ready, just let us know and we will begin.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Okay. Yes. फिर hold up इसको काटिए यहाँ से नीचे से करिए. This is the camera. I think should work now. तो एक ही ऑप्शन है, दूसरा ऑप्शन नहीं कोई. दूसरा
Sir, whenever you are ready, just let us know and we
like this. Okay. Supposing we say this, then it says allow. मैं इसमें allow का कहाँ ऑप्शन है? Okay. यहीं पे है रास्ता. We'll have to do without this. इसमें है. नहीं कुछ नहीं. नहीं. Hello. Hmm.
Yes,
Hello, am
sir.
I audible? Yeah.
Yes, sir. You are audible, sir.
Okay. The problem is with the camera. When I click on it, it says allow, and there's no slot where I can press the button allow. So that is what we are trying to figure out.
Okay,
But
sir.
this is, I don't know where exactly the glitch lies. But anyway, one last try, and probably then we'll give it up. I can go without camera, that means.
Okay, sir.
All right, be that as it may, we have to proceed, I think. We cannot waste more time. So let's go ahead, please. We can start.
Okay, sir. Okay.
A very good afternoon and a warm welcome to all the dignitaries, teachers, students, and all present here. I'm really sorry. A very good afternoon and a warm welcome to all the students and teachers and all the participants present here to the fourth day of our online faculty development program, which deals with the relationship between sustainable development goals and English literature. I warmly welcome to all of you. The Sustainable Development Goals were adopted by the United Nations in 2015 to address global changes and create a more sustainable and equitable world, while their primary aim is to foster positive changes in society and have also had a notable impact on the world of literature, particularly English literature. So, the different topics of our FDP explores how writers and literary works have responded to call for sustainability, social justice, and environmental responsibility. Our aim is to demonstrate how English literature has become a powerful tool in promoting awareness, action in time with the SDGs. Our yesterday's session was on the topic of development of epic theatre by Professor Meenakshi Bawa of Lucknow University. She explains the topic in very interesting and effective manner. It was really a mesmerizing lecture. She also touched the topic of psychoanalytical theory and reconceptualizing Freud in cinema. Now, today we have a session on the topic of role of individual and social psychology in Indian English literature. We are all social psychologists, declare Taswell and Fraser. And psychology deals with the intellectual emotions and the mental feelings of the mental stability and feelings of the individuals. So now, without further ado, I invite Akanksha Yadav of MA Sim 1 to give a brief bio of our esteemed speaker, Professor Jagdish Batra sir of OP Jindal University. Akanksha.
Good afternoon, everyone. Professor Jagdish Batra is Professor and Executive Dean, English and Foreign Languages at OP Jindal Global University, India. Earlier, he worked as Principal and Head of the Postgraduate Department of English in different colleges. With nearly 4 decades of teaching experience, he has guided approximately 50 research scholars. His areas of specialization include contemporary Indian English fiction and culture studies. Professor Batra has presented research papers and also presided over several international conferences in India, Europe, and Southeast Asia. Recipient of many awards, he was also presented the Research Excellence Award by JGU in 2020 and 2021. He is also the convener of 8 annual international literary conferences. A former Rotary Study Exchange Scholar to USA, Professor Batra has published 11 books, 60 research papers in leading journals, and a large number of general articles. He is on the editorial board of 2 literary journals and research panels of many universities. Thank you.
Thank you, Akanksha. Now, I would like to request Professor Jagdish Batra to address the participants.
Thank you so much, uh, Dr. Sugandha Srivastav. She was with me in Singapore conference, and thereafter we have been sporadically in touch with each other. I am thankful to all the dignitaries present here, Dr. Rakesh Jain, who is head of English department here, and Dr. Binu Singh, also co-convener of the conference here. And apart from it, we have Dr. Tulika Ghosh from the Department of English, Ms. Medha Tripathi, and Dr. Ashish Kumar, again from the Department of English. Thank you very much for having me here. And we just heard about a lecture having been delivered on the subject of psychoanalytics with regard to films by Dr. Meenakshi Bawa. Well, the way, in case I had known about it, probably I would also have been one of the audience here. And I'm so glad that you have already discussed something. Probably my lecture would then become a bit, I think, inessential. But anyway, since I've been invited and I'm here with you for this bit of time, so I'll try to do justice to the topic that has been given to me. So first of all, I'd like to know how many of us here happen to be first-time attendees of this program, Faculty Development Workshop. Do we have any idea? Hello?
Sir, I think
Yeah.
most of them have been attending the session for the past 3 days, and today is the fourth day.
Okay, great, great. So now what I mean to say is that, now these, first timers, in the sense that they are fresh, recruited into the jobs as assistant professors and all that. In that case, what we have here in this side of the country is we have orientation programs which touch upon different types of topics, and that is what this also appears to be. And that is for the teachers who have spent a few years only in the academic field. So is that the way I should understand about the audience here, or uh, more than that probably? Because after orientation, we have refresher courses here in particular areas in which faculty members are teaching. So anyway, thank you so much. And we have some 48 members here. Thank you for sparing time on this Sunday afternoon after a hearty meal. And I suppose it's really no good time. And we're talking of psychology. So probably we are missing out a bit on the psychology of the attendees here. Okay. We should have kept in mind the physiological needs also, isn't it? So I hope nobody goes to sleep. Well, there could be a possibility of that also. Anyway, we have to take into account that also. So, friends, coming to the topic that has been given to me, or I have consented to talk about, it is the role of individual and social psychology in Indian English literature. And when I say Indian English literature, basically is the fiction that I'll be dealing with, because that happens to be the predominantly major area of literature that is current now in these times. uh, I think I sent the PPT. Would you be sharing the PPT, please, Dr.
Yes, sir. I'll
Subhendra?
just do that.
Okay. Otherwise, I can try from my side also, I think, in case you don't have it handy. I can try from my side also. Okay. Yeah. So can you put on the slide mode also in case you like, otherwise it's fine, I think. So that is it. You have to click a little more. Yeah. So the topic that we'll be talking about, and my introductory comments would be like this, that if we talk of literature, then leaving aside its stylistic part, and in case we talk of the thematics, then literature has taken direction not from any other discipline so much as from two areas, which is philosophy and psychology. And it has been happening since ancient times. Psychology and philosophy have been so intermixed with the literature, and probably we can move on the slide, please. The next slide. We can go on to the next slide. Click on it and we'll go to the next one.
Sir, from my end, I have changed the slide.
It's not moving. It should move now. It should change, I think.
I can see the introduction slide, sir. A perennial phenomena, Sigmund Freud, etc.
Oh, I believe it's the signal problem. Probably the signal is weak, so that's why the voice also is not reaching perfectly here. Anyway, so when it's possible, you may change the slide. I'll go on. So I was saying that since ancient times, psychology and philosophy have been so mixed with literature that it's virtually impossible to isolate them. And it was as unconscious company that literature had of psychological approach to draw characters and philosophical approach to analyze issues concerning humans and the world. So this, however, will bank solely on the role of psychology of both individuals and society right now in this particular lecture. And as I said, to hedge the wide domain of literature, to delimit it, we shall mainly concentrate on the area of Indian English literature produced in our times, particularly the fiction. Friends, psychological constructs like pathos and catharsis have been discussed in the Western world since the days of Aristotle and Plato, and all of us have been teaching these concepts. The Western world, however, takes consciousness to be a cluster of images and memories only. In our own culture, human psychology has been the subject of probing since Vedic times, when consciousness was sought to be raised to the highest level of cognition and affection, and from there to spiritual experience, which of course is now dubbed as parapsychology. But there are many other terms that throw light on what would be relevant to psychology buffs today also. Take, for example, a threefold assessment of human nature as sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. And I think everybody knows about it. I need not go deep into it. Now, while the play of psychology in portraying characters and their relationships with others in society has been one side of the coin, the other is of the way society brings to bear on individual its own value system. Sigmund Freud quite appealingly described this interrelationship through the three psychic zones, which he called id, ego, and superego. And while id is after pleasure, knowing no norms, almost devil incarnate in common lingo, the superego is the normal, the moral principle as professed in a society. In between lies our ego, which is said to be unconscious but can become conscious enough to regulate the self. The search for balance between id and superego involves conflict so that we have the average human being trying to thread his way through the chaotic marketplace of the world. On the other hand is the deviant character who would not mind quacking a snook at societal norms and going his own way even as society around him decries him no end. Excuse me. Many scholars do not accept Freud's threefold division of the psyche, but they have not reacted against the application of his theories to the symbolic interpretation of literature. Literature has helped psychology just as we bank upon psychological theories to buttress or support our understanding of literature. Freud identified a psychological trait in Sophocles' tragedy Oedipus Rex, which he called Oedipus complex, and applied it to Hamlet, as also to Shakespeare, since Shakespeare wrote his play after his father's death, thus suggesting that there was an autobiographical Oedipal complex as in the play Hamlet. Freud, of course, withdrew it later because there were questions raised upon the authorship of Hamlet. However, the most controversial point of Freudian psychoanalytical criticism is its tendency to interpret imagery in terms of sexuality only. Freud's disciple Jacques Lacan had to deal with mental patients whom he would understand through verbal interactions. And in this, he found the linguistic structure propounded by Saussure useful, so much so that he even found the unconscious to be structured as language and operating through signs, metaphors, and symbols. According to Lacan, the practice of psychoanalysis is dependent exclusively on words, which means on language. So, psychoanalysis must have a theory of its language and meaning also. But whereas Freud studied the relationship between biology and mind, Lacan studied culture, language, and mental structure. Whereas Freud set up a threefold division of the mind, that is id, ego, and superego, Lacan creates a trilogy of imaginary, the symbolic, and sometimes the real. The fantasies and experiences of infantile consciousness are produced in the human subject through language. For Lacan, but doesn't live in a world of realities, but a world of signs, of signifiers. When he says that the unconscious is structured like a language, he means that the unconscious works through metaphors and signs, of course. In other words, unconscious desires are revealed through free associations and dreams made of these symbols. Just as language operates the system, in the same way, society also operates through a series of interrelated signs, roles, and rituals. This order he called the symbolic order. Lacan's development of Freud has had several important influences. Some feminists have suggested the social and political relationships between males and females will not change unless language itself has been radically changed. And we know after Walter. Sorry. Second, Lacan's theory has proved of interest to deconstructors and other post-structuralists. This is because it holds that the ego is a product or a construct. It's produced during the mirror stage and seems unified, but Lacan says the unified self or ego is a fiction. So it is the job of Lacanian psychoanalyst to deconstruct the ego or to show contradictions in it. Now, psychoanalytic theory has impacted many areas like historiography, feminism, film studies, post-structuralism, etc. While feminist critics like Luz Igriari, Helene Sixo, Judith Butler, and Juliet Michel have applied Lacanian psychoanalysis to their readings of texts in complex ways, the work of the versatile duo Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari stands out as they have extended the bounds of psychoanalysis. Deleuze and Guattari came up with the concept of schizoanalysis, an anti-Oedipus published in 1977. They reject the idea of repression and point out that trying to create an ego in a schizoid or a person with lack of interest in social relationships can lead to sickness. This is because the unconscious is forced to enter the domain of signifiers, even though it's already full of its own reservoir of images. This was opposed to Lacan's formulation that the unconscious is all about lack or vacuity. Lack, according to Deleuze and Guattari, is created by the contemporary market forces, which always impel one to absorb one image or the other, buy this or that product from the market, because one is persuaded to believe that she doesn't have it and thereby has a lack. And they remark, and I quote, schizophrenia is the exterior limit of capitalism itself, or the conclusion of its deepest tendency, unquote. Deleuze and Guattari criticized the central organ model of the unconscious in the form of a tree, and instead came up with rhizome model represented by grass type growth, with its non-linear network type having multiple beginnings and endings, quite a different version of the unconscious. It would not be out of place here to refer to another Freud's disciple, namely C.G. Jung, who, while working on collective unconscious, gave a new dimension to self. His notion of collective unconscious manifests as dreams, myths, archetypes, images or figures, and story patterns shared in different cultures. In this, the individual agency seems to be limited as it is oppressed by the weight of God knows how many generations of unconscious imagery. His research opened the doors on myths which are found in every culture all over the world. Anthropologists like James Fraser and Levi Strauss too. There was spotlight on certain archetypal images like sun, water, tree, etc. We take up these concepts while undertaking mythical criticism in literature now. However, our main concern here is the psychological aspect of individuals who are pitted against forces internal as also external, and the external forces manifest in social groups starting from family and covering spiral-like bigger and bigger groupings like kinship, caste, clan group, language group, regional group, nation, etc. Individuals have their instinctive drives attitudes, behavioral patterns, and prejudices. When they come together, they display some group tendencies. The social psychologists like to study the group dynamics as seen in public opinion, social media, trends, fashions, rumors, etc. There is also the domain of social norms. Kurt Lewin is known as the father of social psychology, which began as a discipline in the United States at the dawn of the 20th century. Other notable names are B.F. Skinner, Alfred Adler, Steven Pinker et al. One could fall for the temptation of advancing the scope of social psychology also further on to where sociology as a discipline takes over. However, we must understand that whereas social psychology studies the behavior of individuals as members of a society, sociology goes beyond the individual and takes up groups as entities that function within society. Max Weber, Durkheim, Karl Marx, Auguste Comte, Pierre Bourdieu, André Bretil, M. N. Srinivas et al. Are some of the leading figures in the field. Now, the conflict is central in all the postulates and theories studying individual vis-a-vis society. It's also at the center of all creative literature, particularly fiction and drama, that deal with the individual placed in society. All these discoveries and revelations have added to the approach of creative writers who have been portraying internal and external struggles in their characters. It's not a one-way traffic though, since even the psychologists have looked upon the literary texts as cases to be mulled over and diagnosed just as they do in case of real-life patients. The term Oedipus complex, for example, was coined after the name of the Greek mythical figure Oedipus, son of King Elias and Queen Jocasta of Thebes, who killed his father and married his mother unconsciously, which, according to the belief of the people of the time, was designed by destiny, but which was interpreted by Freud as issuing from a stage in the development of human psyche. May I request Dr. Sugandha to kindly change the slide now to the next one. Now I'll be talking a bit about application. Yeah. Friends, there are any number of votaries of the Freudian theory, as for example, Ernest Jones, who applied it to Hamlet, Mary Bonaparte, who applied it to the works of Edgar Allan Poe. But let me submit that it's not necessary to go by these theories only. As we shall see in a while, there are several influences that can impact an individual. Man is not only born with certain DNA and collective conscious or unconscious, but also learns from the environment around him, which means the family, peer group, education, society, media, etc., and his own response also to these stimuli. All these continue to leave impressions on his unconscious mind and ego turning to conscious also. Unconscious, which Freud describes as a chaos, a cauldron of seething excitement with no organization and no unified will. The response can take any form, like the ripple that rises from the unconscious pond, as William James described it. When a stone is thrown into it, it gives rise to ripples, and they keep on expanding, making a kind of circle, bigger and bigger one when it comes to the surface. So that when there is a stimulus, uh, you know, given to our mind, so the thought rises from the unconscious pond, and until it reaches the surface of the conscious level, we are not aware of what exactly is happening and what color it is taking, which kind of shape it will take, etc. So it's very difficult to imagine as to what the response would be, colored as it is by our unconscious part of the mind. And therefore, it becomes necessary to examine what might have influenced actions of a character. In an individual centric fiction, whether it is having hero or heroine in the center, the focus in it is on the protagonist who carves out a niche for himself or herself in the midst of chaotic situation. The issue of identity or self becomes crucial to this category. Since identity is constructed in a society, the relationships that the individual forges with others in the world to reflect his or her personality. Family, as a microcosm of society, represents a network of relations that nature provides to humans to mold the personality and which culture transforms over time. When it comes to women, the traditional value system of the family and society pose a greater challenge than these would to a male. Even a fiercer challenge is faced by the transgender category, and individuals with a challenged physical or mental state, regardless of the gender, they form another category which must be looked into from the psychological angle. Major Indian authors who have published individual-centric works in the 21st century, that is within the span of 20 odd years, they include mainly, and I'm only talking of people who have written in this particular part of the time frame. Anita Desai, Shashi Deshpande, even though they were writing earlier also, but they have contributed even in this century also. Chitra Banerjee Divakarni, Amit Chaudhary, Anita Nair, Jayashree Mishra, Jerry Pinto, Janice Parriott, Anis Salim, Avani Doshi. It's an endless list actually. In fact, I've covered in brief all these novelists who published their works in these 20 odd years, 2001 to 2020, in my latest book, Indian English Fiction, 2001 to 2020, History and Reflections. It has novels belonging to some 20 other categories also, apart from the individual specific fiction writers. Like there are other categories like diaspora, history, myths, marginalized sections, travel, adventure, thrillers, whatever. Here I'm going to take up a few of the contemporary writers with broad comments about their works, followed by detailed analysis of a text, as time would permit. Text too, maybe, as the time would permit. As I do so now, I'm also conscious of something that is, it's just like the radiant trace of psychology in almost all types of novels, good novels at that. For example, when we deal with the diasporic community, or we are having a crime thriller, over there also there are psychological aspects of characters which can be brought to light. In serious fiction, it definitely is done. In popular fiction, of course, there's no scope for that kind of treatment. Even though, I mean, not every novel is the same type. What I mean is that in any work wherein characters happen to be present, psychological analysis perforce comes in, even as it is the writer's prerogative to go deep into it or not. It's another matter that the findings may substantiate a particular psychological theory or give rise to a new kind of mindset, may reveal a different kind of mind that calls for a novel theory, a new theory. Human mind can come under several influences, as I said before, and it can act in very different ways, which may present surprise to us. Now, coming to writers, there are influences and writers also. If we talk about a literary personality, his work is normally analyzed as a product of his biographical account that involves the family standing in which he is born, his education, socio-political, cultural conditions, as also the literary tendencies current at the time. A character in such a work, though created by the writer, reflects a melange of such influences. However, the character may turn out to be a unique figure also that doesn't conform to any of the psychological stereotypes and may pose a challenge to psychologists also. After all, psychologists too have been influenced by literature, literary themes and characters to evolve psychological theories, starting with Oedipus complex, etc. So now let's go on to examine some literatures. Next slide, please. Friends, there are a number of novels published by authors of Indian origin, and it may not be wise on my part to talk about all of them. I intend taking up briefly some of them with different themes just to show that there is always scope for psychological probing. Now, take for example the woman-centric fiction of Shashi Deshpande. She has written about different types of relationships like mother-daughter, father-daughter, husband-wife, lover-beloved, etc. While Deshpande brings out effectively and aesthetically women's exploitation, suppression, and marginalization in the context of Indian society, what is of interest to us is the fact that over the years, one can also mark a subtle change in her characters, so that the forward-looking Manjari of the novel Moving On, which was published in 2004, is very different from the submissive Jaya of That Long Silence, published in 1989. In That Long Silence, we come across a repressed protagonist who comes to recognize herself only towards the end of the novel. As the last sentence in the book reflects her thoughts, and I quote, I will have to speak to listen, I'll have to erase the silence between us. The anger I had felt when that then comes back to me when I realized what I have been doing all these years. And if there is anything I know now, it is this: life is always to be made possible, unquote. So that shows the resolve, but towards the end. Now, in Moving On, we find a liberated woman who moves in tandem with the times. This novel dwells on societal expectations from women which pay scant regard to their needs. The protagonist Manjari, also known as Gigi, is portrayed as an unconventional woman who marries Shyam, the man of her choice, against the wishes of her mother. Later, Shyam falls for Gigi's sister, Malu, and impregnates her before committing suicide. There's another character, Raja, her childhood friend and a widower. He now proposes to her, okay, to Gigi, but she refuses. Instead, she develops physical relations with another fellow, Rajan, and she has the guts to reveal this frankly to her friend also, Raja also. And she says, and I quote, it was just the body, nothing but his body, unquote. Now, this shows the change in the thinking over this period that has happened, uh, even in women characters. It may be tall order, maybe not everybody would agree to it, because after all, there is a middle class society which is very scrupulous about all the social norms. But then there are exceptions also, of which our novelists talk. There's another novel, In the Country of Deceit, published in 2008. This is the story of self-realization by the protagonist Devayani. Who is she? She is a young middle-class girl who chooses to live alone in the small town of Rajanur after her parents' death, ignoring the views of her family and friends. Then she meets Ashok Chinnappa, Rajanur's new district superintendent of police, and they fall in love, even though Ashok is much older than her, is married, has a 10-year-old daughter. Both of them realize from the very beginning that the relationship has no future. While her elder sister accuses her of stooping low for sex, Devyani believes she has found true love for the first time. Now, despite the expected end to this relationship, Devyani cherishes happy memories. And Deshpande delves deep into the female psyche to underline the agony of suppressed women at various levels. Hers is a powerful voice of protest, we know, articulated artistically, and her storytelling has an omniscient reflective undercurrent. In order to portray the psyche of women in a realistic and balanced manner, she gives equal space to the other gender also. There are a number of male characters in her later novels, because of which her concern transcends the gender-specific predicament of humanity. Deshpande doesn't support the Western type of radical feminism we know. A woman's is a unique journey in life as portrayed in Deshpande's fiction. It shows that even though our women protagonists are educated and they do act as feminists to start with, however, post-marriage, they submit to the patriarchal culture and suffer a long time before they re-examine themselves and reach the stage of self-realization. This is a realistic picture of most females in our society that Deshpande has brought to us. Her task in revealing the psyche of characters is very admirable because they are seen as part of the family, as against the Western concept of individualized women. Here, they do not debunk family, which is valued here, and it's also being recognized in a country like America now because too much of individualism is now recoiling on them. Only thing that Deshpande would have is that the adjustment of women should be within the family on equal terms with men. For this, she recommends education, change in patriarchal mindset, and while that may take a long time to fructify, to have bonding among women rather than the conflict-ridden mother-in-law versus daughter-in-law relationship. Due to lack of understanding husbands in the novels, the women develop extramarital affairs also, but the writer doesn't take these relationships too far and brings about a closure very soon. Now, the growth of women characters from immaturity to maturity demands a lot of psychological probing. I'm sure you understand that. And Deshpande is a brilliant novelist who does this with artistic elan and finesse. Next slide, please. Now, we come to Anita Desai. Among the contemporary writers, Anita Desai has been associated with psychological approach to literature, to characters. In most of her novels, elements of philosophy of existentialism are seen informing her characters. In fact, a branch of humanist psychology is also existential psychology, as outlined by an American psychologist, Rollo May. It goes to show how the idea of short existence in the world affects a person's behavior. Mostly, it is responsible for giving rise to anxiety and worries about death. But one can find in these characters a search for authentic existence. They can still be glued to that kind of search despite their understanding of death being so imminent. Anita Desai is, I hope you understand what I'm talking of in respect of Anita Desai's novel. Anita Desai has penned 12 novels, I think more than 12 now, and a collection of short stories also, too, probably, for children over a creative career spanning 6 decades. What imparts individuality her novels is the psychological depth of her characters, brought out in a language that is equal to the task. Themes like alienation, intercultural relationships, individual or family conflicts, etc., have been taken up by her in the novels, and these can be subsumed under individual and social psychology. When it comes to the exploration of individual psyche, most studies underline the negative elements of existential thinking, like alienation, rootlessness, normlessness, etc., highlighted by her. And these tendencies concern both individual as also social psychology, as I said. But what catches our attention is a certain urge felt by a protagonist to lead an authentic life. The focus on negative traits has been there, and this, to my mind, is less than complete appraisal of the philosophy of existentialism, because it's generally portrayed in negative colors. This philosophy also treats man as mature and powerful enough to stand on his own feet and decide his fate, as also that of the entire human race, with full responsibility. What an individual does, an individual committed to the philosophy of existentialism does, it's also to be taken that it sets an example for others to follow. Anita Desai's protagonists like Maya, Nirod, Devan, Matthew, or Eric in different novels, they show courage to taste the bitter fruit of life. Things may or may not go their way, but a sincere struggle to lead an authentic existence cannot be denied on their part. According to existentialists who developed the concept of authentic existence, man is always found in a situation. This situation, often referred to as human predicament, is fraught with anguish, anxiety, despair, and dread. And normally this life is inauthentic. Heidegger also talks of this as jiva finite, thrownness, the fact that one is born into a world which one did not make. This is effectivity, or the predicament of man. With a limitless mind imprisoned in a limited body, there is bound to be frustration and despair. Hence, existentialism talks of anguish, angst, and nausea, etc. There is no logic or rationale behind the phenomenon of this world. In fact, reason cannot cope with the particular or the contingent, as it depends too much on the general and the universal. Therefore, meaninglessness and normlessness are dear to the existentialists. Despite these odds, the concept of complete freedom is central to existentialism, which means acting entirely according to one's own free will. It means freedom to choose, but the existential choice is well guarded against any nuance of compromise. The criterion of one's choice must be truly one's own. Mostly, we find some aesthetic or ethical considerations upheld by society or religion, influencing our choice of a particular course of action. According to Kierkegaard, the existentialist, man must turn to the inner voice, a voice that is a product neither of social conditioning nor of reason. This self-conscious appropriation of the conditions of one's own existence and identity is called authenticity in existential language. Anita Desai places an enlightened, and let's read it as existentially conscious individual in a predicament or a situation. The search has different goals. The quest could be of self-identity, for the space to exist, or for the freedom to live life in a particular manner. So Maya, in the novel Cry the Peacock, locates her authentic life in marital bliss and compatible companionship. She demands life on her own terms, however irrational it may appear to her husband. I quote her remark, giving me an opal ring to wear on my finger, he didn't notice the translucent skin beneath, the blue flashing veins that ran under and out of the bridge of gold and jolted me into smiling with pleasure each time I saw it, unquote. That was husband's fault. Unpardonable. We know that in the end, she pushes Gautam, her husband, off the parapet of the roof, leading to his death. And Maya justifies this decision. And I quote what she thinks. Quote, the man who had no contact with the world or with me, what would it matter to him if he died and lost even the possibility of contact? What would it matter to him? Unquote. In determining the authenticity of life, she is surely her own judge, and she must not be guided by any external yardstick of reason or duty or some transcendental entity, because existentialists don't believe in any kind of guidance through any book or guru or any scholar or whatever, any philosophy also. The argument advanced by her in arriving at the decision to do away with Gautam is fully hers, and there's no hint of remorse on her face, and she is so cool as cucumber after the act is committed. What she forgets as an existentialist is that when she acts the way she does, she should allow others also to follow her act. In this lies the element of responsibility, which is the other side of the coin of freedom in existentialist philosophy. Existentialists hold man responsible for his actions because he has no guide either in God or in a priori realm of values. Comparing the philosophies of Sartre and Heidegger, one notes that both believe that people must give themselves goals and meaning, and the more fully they realize this, the more authentic they become. For Sartre, this contingency is a cause for celebration because it means people are free to create the best lives they can. But this freedom sharply increases the burden of responsibilities also. Taking up the existentialist plank, the predicament of Nirodh in the novel Voices in the City can be summed up as a limitless mind imprisoned in a limited body. The world doesn't move according to his innermost urges, known to the outside world as whims and desires only. The initial partisan attitude of parents with regard to his brother Arun and later his mother's liaison with Major Chadda have jolted him. All that leads to frustration and despair. His dream to become a successful playwright or continue the publication of literary journal Voice is met with failure. Hence, existential anguish and angst, as also the sense of alienation from society and self, come his way. Nirodh develops a personal value system that does not require social approval and which success is, and I quote, only one of their nets, he says. This thing called success or reputation, and when you hear it singing about your ears, the only thing to do is to drop everything, run, unquote. So that's his own value system. He desires certitude in this world that is ever in flux. It's clear from his reference to Camus' observation. I quote again, in default of inexhaustible happiness, eternal suffering at least would give us a destiny, but we do not have even that consolation. And our worst agonies come to an end one day. Everything is in flux. He locates authentic life in 3 drinks and a roof and his general voice. And for this, he can treat his aunt by selling a fake artifact to her, sponge his friends, and can brashly tell Bose what he thinks of him. Neither success nor failure reveals to him the meaning of life. His quest culminates in a transcendental illusion. Was illusion his mother merging with the goddess Kali, whereupon his search ceases. The existentialists, after all, do not merely value the mundane and the physical, but also recognize that which appeals to our supra-mental personality called soul in the Indian philosophy. I'm sorry, my throat is pretty bad. These same novels have been critiqued on the basis of Abraham Maslow's theory of motivation and of hierarchy of needs also by a scholar whose thesis was sent to me for evaluation. Maslow recognized this. I think it is a good thesis. That's why I'm sharing the outcome of that thesis. Maslow recognizes the following needs in hierarchical manner in humans. Number 1, physiological needs. Number 2, safety and security. Number 3, love and belonging. Number 4, self-esteem. Number 5, self-actualization. Once again, physiological needs, that's food, etc., food, shelter, etc. Safety, security, love, self-esteem, and self-realization or actualization. The order of the hierarchy may be different for different people. For some, esteem outweighs love, while others may self-actualize despite poverty also. And yet, by and large, the hierarchy of needs has been hailed because Maslow, as a psychologist, studied so many life graphs and came to this conclusion. Our behaviors are usually motivated by multiple needs simultaneously also. Maya and Monisha are failures because they're not able to actualize themselves. Their basic urges of preservation of species remain unfulfilled also. And this generates in them the feeling of meaningless existence, causing severe anxiety and depression. And this researcher says finding themselves incapable of coping with the resultant trauma of their unfulfilled needs, they find exiting as a safe recourse. So that is another evaluation of these characters. Now coming next to, please go on to the next frame. After Anita Desai, we take up Jhumpa Lahiri's novel, and that would be my last text of this lecture. See, Jhumpa Lahiri, we know, is a very renowned novelist, was won Pulitzer Prize also for interpretive melodies, and then there are several novels written by her. We know of her earlier novel, The Namesake, which was prescribed in many universities, but The Lowland is probably still low on the charts, so to say. But psychologically, I mean, if we talk of psychological approach, then it comes up with very startling kind of character. So that is what fascinated me to undertake this work, but analysis. Jhumpa Lahiri's novel, The Lowland, presents mysterious minds Besides, we are not given the benefit of direct interior monologue in this novel, which could give us a clue. It starts with the snippets of shared life experiences of two teenage brothers, Subhash and Udayan. Born 15 months apart, these children of Bengali parents settled in Calcutta are immensely friendly with each other. Both the children are interested in science and conduct experiments at home. In the streets of Tollygunge, they wander before dusk, and the hyacinth-strewn pond they play for hours on end. Why I'm referring to ponds? Because these are very significant in the novel. As they grow up, Udayan, the elder one, impulsive and somewhat troublesome child, feels attracted towards Naxalism. You know, Naxalism, Naxalite movement that preached a violent end to capitalist class. So committed is Udayan to the ideology that he would risk his married life, his pregnant wife, his brother and parents. Of course, wife comes a little later, but all these years he has been learning and mouthing and propagating this philosophy of Naxalism that was a gift to India from China to work for the party. It seems he is totally moved by the superego, the Marxist discourse that possessed West Bengal at that time. It looks like his rowdy it, because he was a rowdy child, and the prevalent violent discourse as superego have had a good meeting ground. And so the revolutionary is born, and as it happens with every revolutionary, is also eliminated by the state very soon. However, the second of the two brothers, Subhash, is not interested in this ideology. His ego is rather moved by reason, as he is more inclined towards making a mark in academics. He goes over to the US to study further. When he learns about his brother's death, he is there in the US, he learns about his brother's death at the hands of the police. He comes back to India. And by that time, Udayan was married. He left behind a widow. So it is here that he thinks seriously about resettling Udayan's widow, whose name is Gauri. Much against the wishes of his parents, he marries Gauri and takes her to the States to usher her into a new life. He believes she would be able to forget Udayan's tragedy and find meaning in life. Obviously, Subhash is wrong. Even when he took her as wife, she seemed lost in herself and was rather doubtful about the outcome of Subhash's proposal. He had to assure her that he would not go against her wishes and that she would be free to lead her own kind of life in the US also. In the US, bringing her around to wife's ways was a painfully long and finally an unsuccessful affair. However, the fact is that the story dealing with Gauri's life in America is a journey from a silent, inchoate state to an Americanized, libertine avatar. That also happens. Total metamorphosis. Finally, when they are able to unite physically, it's almost a one-sided affair again. Gauri's response is very lackadaisical, very uncertain, very flimsy, superficial. What else can you call it? Later, she plunges herself into the study of philosophy, rather than taking up any radical role of a political activist as her husband had done. Her study of philosophy also doesn't center around Marxism now. It is abstract philosophical musing about mind and time that she seeks to master and to teach to students. She has a single track mind that remains obsessed with academics to the extent that she forsakes her daughter from Udayan, whose name is Bela. The novel, however, does not only record Gauri's escapism into a thoroughly academic world, it also shows Udayan's daughter's incapacity. Udayan's means, again, Udayan Gauri's daughter, Bela's incapacity for feelings of love and concern. She also grows the same way. It is ostensibly explained as resulting from a motherless state that she had to face when Gauri suddenly walked out on her second husband, that is Subhash, one day leaving her child behind. The novelist does not give the reader a glimpse into her consciousness, Bela's consciousness, Gauri's consciousness. The objective third-person narrative has its plus points, But when a psychological issue of this type is under scanner, the intimate in-scape portrayal of the character involved in the form of interior monologue definitely helps. But then we know Jhumpa Lahiri gives the externals, just like object to correlatives, will not give you directly what is happening in the mind. One has to make do with those external signs as to what is happening inside. That is her art. So as it is, one has to gather it from Gauri's tangible actions only. She is portrayed as a free-willed person who wishes to abjure the self-cultivated obsession of sanctifying Udyan's memory through abstinence. She wants to give up that feeling also. And there's a quote from the novel. I quote, "She slept with him," that is Subhash, "because it had become more of an effort not to. She wanted to terminate the expectation she had begun to sense from him, asked to extinguish Udyan's ghost, to smother what haunted her. So wanted to forget her dead husband and didn't want, to have kind of intimacy with Subhash also. It was all body only. Granted that she starts living life at the Laurentian level of physicality, what is it that haunts her mentally that the above line indicates? Did she consider herself responsible for her husband's murder? Were these the pangs of conscience over marrying her dead husband's brother and being approached by him? The writer resorts to the artist's prerogative of avoiding a direct answer. An explanation could be that Subhash's parents had not been able to reconcile to this decision, and Gauri was deep in grief over Udyan's murder and yielded to Subhash's altruistic step. But later, she regretted the decision. If this were the case, there was no point in taking to a number of lovers freely in America. That's what she does. She takes a number of lovers in America. Subhash is an exception. So when she deserts the second husband, she is a free-willed person and going in for sex with this and that fellow. Was it also the numbing effect she found in Subhash's company that worked as intoxicant to forget the moral question that she faced? But what of the child she got from Udyan? If she was deep in love with the memory of her husband, Bela should have been a precious legacy to her. How could she forsake her? Subhash, on the other hand, devoted himself wholeheartedly to bringing up Bela, playing the dual roles of mother and father to her. Something of a puzzle here. When Bela wants a babysitter for her daughter, Subhash disagrees. Bela also grows. She also has a daughter later on, from whom we don't know. So it's almost 4 generations covered in this novel. So when Bela's daughter comes up, then Subhash also looked after her. He would rather himself look after her. Gauri's reaction to be noted here is that she says, and so she felt antagonized by the man who did nothing to antagonize her, and by Bela, who did not even know the meaning of the word. This again is the quizzical streak in Gauri's character. Gauri, it would be seen, was unemotional, as when Bela threw tantrum one day and would not go to school, she grasped her hand tightly and dragged her to the school bus. It suggested that the bloody scenes of Calcutta had steeled her. There's a comment, I quote, "I watched your father killed before my eyes," she might have said, unquote. Is it the same callousness that enables her to walk over her husband? If yes, then it sits ill with the touted emotional attachment with the dead husband. She was least bothered about Subhash's sensitivity when she decided to give herself a new look. On the other hand, on seeing a middle-aged man, she feels attracted, which shows a lack of moral scruples also. And moral scruples were suspected to be behind her distance from Subhash, who had done so much for her. So where are the moral scruples also? Very puzzling. Gauri wanted to be independent. For that matter, she started leaving Bela for a short jaunt to a store around the corner. The short furlough expanded to many minutes of absence from home, leaving child Bela to fend for herself. When Subhash found her missing one day, he was deeply upset. He could sense the insensitivity in Gauri's character. I quote, the wide berth for herself that she had been seeking in their marriage, he now willingly gave. He no longer wanted to touch her in bed. He no longer brought up the possibility of a second child, unquote. The gulf between the two was now widening fast. For herself. One can believe that this change attitude was not entirely due to the past traumatic experience. Perhaps the American individualism pervading the society of their adopted land had given a fillip to it. Things would have been different in case she had stayed on in India. Ironically, she leaves home in America when Subhash and Bela are in India on a short visit following his father's death. Subhash and Gauri's daughter Bela, they are traveling in India because Subhash's father is dead, and Gauri is there in America, and she then deserts the husband also. Gauri had stayed back apparently due to her dissertation work. Walking over her husband is not the one thing that throws in bold relief the callousness in Gauri's character. The novelist traces her life till many years later also. Many years later also, there are incidents mentioned. Leaving her daughter Bela and not even thinking of her for many, many years is something it doesn't easily appeal to mind. Opposed to Gauri, Bela is an intellectual type who would use knowledge for the betterment of marginalized people. Gauri is also intellectual. She is also a professor now, but she is only studying, and also copulating with fellows. Bela is using her knowledge of botany, I think that's the subject, to help peasants. She had done her major in environmental science, and her senior thesis was on the effect of a pesticide in a local river. Instead of studying further at the graduate level, she chooses her own path. She rejects, like her father Udayan did, a comfortable family life. Instead, at 21, she joins the Peace Corps. She works on the farm, irrigating field, harvesting crop, cleaning animal pens, etc. She moves from one farm to another across different states in America. She doesn't mind if she is paid a pittance or just provided food and shelter as compensation. She's virtually a nomad. But when she visits home, she tries to apply green technology to areas of daily life also. The writer seems to have yielded to what is termed as the character growing out of mold cast by the writer. Coming back to Gauri, we find her moral dilemma does not stay for long. The writer admits, and I quote, her ideology was isolated from practice, neutered by its long tenure in the academy long ago. She had wanted her work to be in deference to Udayan, but by now it was a betrayal of everything he had believed in, all the ways he had influenced and inspired her, surely cultivated her for her own intellectual gain. Unquote. As a researcher and later as a professor, she doesn't uphold or teach any revolutionary ideals. Gauri takes to American ways instead. She enjoys sexual freedom and juggled lovers. These are the exact words, juggled lovers. Though she doesn't allow them to complicate her life. A fiercely freedom-loving woman that she is. She also has a lesbian liaison with Lorna, her attendant, her secretary. Clearly, the moral high ground in not accepting Subhash is no longer available to Gauri now, when the novelist examines moral conundrums inherent in violent revolution. That's a critical comment. Despite the passage of so many years, Gauri doesn't think of seeing her daughter. Both the mother and daughter share a common craze for unbridled freedom. Bela keeps in touch with people, including Subhash, her foster father, on her own terms. Though she appreciates Subhash's parenting, now she becomes an unwed mother, fourth generation, but does not care to be in touch with the father of the child. I quote, the father was not part of her life, not aware of her condition. He was simply someone Bela had known, with whom she had been involved. She didn't want to inform him because he is not the kind of father I want for my child. He is nothing like you, Subhash. That's what she tells her foster father. Bela is angry towards Subhash, her foster father also, as she believes him to be responsible for driving out her mother and not trying to win her back. Now, there's another side of the picture. On one side, she appreciates Subhash, but on the other side, she degrades him also. The turnaround comes when she becomes pregnant, but then reality dawns on her. How? The turnaround comes when she becomes pregnant and envisioning complications ahead. Subhash tells her about her parentage. Learning that he is not a real father, Bill has lost it for a while. Description of self is interesting. She tells Drew, the farmer for whom she finally fell, that she had been created by two people who had loved one another. She had been raised by two who never did. Wonderful comment. By the time Bela is 33 and Suva is 60 years old, Gauri visits her abandoned family. The shame, something unexplained in the novel, that had flooded her veins was permanent now. She would never be free from that. Ultimately, she had come seeking Bela, who Gauri has come home looking for Bela, her daughter. She had come to ask about Bela's life, to ask Subhash if she might contact her now, to ask if there was a phone number, an address to which she might write, to ask if Bela might be open to this before it was too late, unquote. She had come with this idea in mind. In Subhash, Gauri hoped to see an old version of her dead first husband, Udin, now. Now, when she comes, Subhash is away with a girl, Alice, with whom he is not starting going out. At home, Meghna, Bela's young daughter, was there along with her mother, Bela, who was doing household chores. And as expected, when Gauri enters, she gets a mouthful from Bela. It was an encounter of two women who fiercely guarded their freedom, which meant self-sufficiency, meaning as much truck with fellow beings as was adequate for self-fulfillment and sexual satisfaction. The difference existed in that, whereas Bela had chosen a vocation which directly served the downtrodden and the marginalized, Gauri had grown into a smug intellectual given to academic pursuits only. The lesson that Bela drew from troubled relationship was that she could appreciate parental emotions and desired to give to her daughter now the same care and love that she had got from Subhash in the absence of her mother. Therefore, as Gauri entered, the first salvo fired by Bela was a poser. Why have you come here? And asked her to get out. Gauri did try to explain, but Bela would have none of it. She said she knew about Udayan, meaning she did not find the reason of Gauri's callousness following Udayan's death. It was not a substantial excuse. You are not my mother, you are nothing, she told her mother, and added, you are as dead to me as he is, unquote. Well, that naturally shook her. Now, this summing up of life will not convince many, for clearly it was she herself who had felt guilty of not standing behind Udayan. She also remembered Bela's sarcastic assessment of her existence. For her, Gauri did not exist, and she was very tormented. Now, what she does? She goes to Calcutta. And standing there in Calcutta on a tower, she aspires to annihilate the remnants of self and contemplate suicide, to achieve the bond of not existing, to be one with Udayan this way. How come? Thought about Udayan has come back. And there's a passage from the text I quote. She leaned forward. She saw the spot where she would fall. She recalled the thrill of meeting him, of being adored by him, the moment of losing him, the fury of learning how he had implicated her, the ache of bringing Bela into the world after he was gone. She opened her eyes. He was not there, unquote. So what she does, she gives up the idea of suicide. They don't seem convincing. Because if there was a moral question, it had faded long back. It's like, what T.S. Eliot says of Hamlet's inaction, for which he had faulted Shakespeare. So her late visits to Bela and to Calcutta fit ill with her unabashed material existence in America. The writer debunks her scruples and makes her return to Rhode Island now. As a postscript, the novelist introduces Meghna's innocent query about Gauri, along with Bela's assurance to Gauri that when Meghna is older, when she and I are both ready, we can try to meet you again, maybe. So that is the assurance held out to Gauri. Now, this character of Gauri is hardly consistent to carry conviction. And one simplistic way to approach the twin characters of Bela and Gauri can be to look at them as illustrations of twin elements, heredity and environment. Bela and Gauri, I'm talking of. In the theory of evolution, in case of Gauri, we do not know of her parental lineage. She comes into the family of Udyan and Subhash. All that we know is that she was witness to the horrendous act which took away her husband's life. This came as a climax to her earlier exposure to Naxalite environs of Calcutta, where she barely escaped getting victimized herself also. Udyan's death was a big shock for her. Her transportation to USA and the consequent change of milieu did not bring her to the golden mean of life. Instead, she swung to the other extreme, getting thoroughly Americanized and living life as a free animal. It shows her weak identity, which got transmuted under the pressure of environment. As for the moral question tormenting Gauri, which has been highlighted by some critics, suffices to say that Gauri's scruples of loyalty to her late husband taper off over a period of time. When she starts sleeping with other lovers, it's definitely time for her to shed the masquerade. And yet she desists from patching up with Subhash and Bela and merrily goes on with her newly acquired American sense of fulfillment in life, something for which she is thankful to American environment. The only word that represents her nature vis-a-vis Subhash is selfish or purely self-conscious. So do you call it id or superego? Up to us. Bela, on the other hand, appears a mixed copy of her parents. There are hints thrown in by the writer, behaving as Gauri used to do, this comment. Heredity expresses itself in her altruistic mission to help the destitute, just as her father Udyan was moved by the plight of the downtrodden in India and had taken the radical path that appeared to him to be the only remedy in the Indian condition. She swims against the materialist current in America and feels impressed by the 18th century cult preaching celibacy and simple life, though she amends the celibacy injunction later on. This is her take on radicalism of her father, joined to free-willing lifestyle of her mother. Service to humanity is one, free lifestyle is the other. Father and mother. She has steely determination like a mother, refuses to have any truck with the father of the child. Heredity, let me mention, heredity depends on the gene pool of quite a few generations. As such, it becomes sometimes quizzical to link a particular trait to one's immediate parents. In Bela's case, Subhash rightly comments, how could we expect Bela to be interested in marriage, given the example he and Gauri had given? They were a family of solitaries. They had collided and dispersed. This was a legacy. If nothing else, she had inherited that impulse from them. That's very much there in the book. However, if these characters could be strictly subsumed under either of the two rubrics, that is heredity and environment, they would be flat and wooden. As it is, we find the characters growing and changing also. We know that heredity and environment act together in different proportion. Great advances have been made and continue to be made in unraveling the functioning of human mind in our times. Psychologists like William James, Sigmund Freud, Jacques Lacan, et al. Have contributed greatly to understanding of the subconscious. One could also ask the same issue from purely Freudian perspective. The two psychic zones, namely id and superego, are always in conflict. And what comes out is the conscious ego. Gauri has a strong id that had been lying dormant in India on account of the overbearing family and societal superego. Her ego was almost the reflection of the superego here. But in America, the id had a better chance to grow, to manifest itself. Hence, her libertine nature expressed itself vigorously. In this, she was free to make choices. Her bonding with Subhash did not come through due to the element of superego that she saw in the Indian personality of Subhash. With the Americans, she would have equation on purely American cultural grounds. Her daughter Bela was already growing in American milieu, even if Subhash, as her foster father, with his Indian cultural baggage, provided an ideal that she could appreciate like most Americans would. But when it came to her personal choices, she was as free as a mother. In this, there was not much of a mismatch between the id and the superego. Despite these theoretical formulations in the field of human psychology, it remains an unfathomable zone. We believe now that human action may depend upon any immediate or past experience, thought, emotion, instinct, repressed or raw, stored in the unconscious. Therefore, writers today abstain from portraying fixed characters. They live moment to moment only. In the lowland, Lahiri presents interesting psychological case studies. Indeed, one tends to agree with the Washington Post reviewer who comments, and I quote, the words of the familiar, the exotic, the best of human nature, and the most selfish inhabit Jhumpa Lahiri's new novel, The Lowland. Next slide, please. Please change the slide. Hello, are you able to hear me?
Change the slide, sir. I've changed it.
Okay, it will come up. I have not seen it yet. That would be the last, I think. It's not yet appeared here. The last slide.
Yes, sir. It is the last slide.
Okay. So I'm going to conclude now. While concluding, I wish to submit that the psychology and literature enjoy an umbilical relationship. One can help the other, but at the same time, we must understand that with the knowledge explosion that has gathered an unparalleled momentum in our times, the fields of literature and psychology have expanded so much that to believe that a psychologist will be able to appreciate literature fully, or that a literateur would be able to absorb all the nuances of psychology, that would be misconception. We, as students of literature, must remember that the psychological analysis helps to draw or understand characters more convincingly, though beyond that, it may black out some other aspects, particularly the aesthetic and thematic dimensions of literature. We should also avoid the temptation of indulging in jargon, which may turn out to be inappropriately used. Friends, thank you so much for your patience. That's what I had to say.
Thank you so much, sir. It was truly an informative session and a lecture, of course. The way you taught and share your knowledge, that is remarkable, and it forced us to think in many different ways. So now the next segment of our session is question answer. So we are going to have a question answer session. And so I hand it over to Shiva Dikshit, a student of MA second year. There are some questions. He put up the questions that are forwarded by the participants to you. Shiva.
Good evening, sir.
Very good evening.
Thank you so much, sir, for the informative session. There is a question from Devan Shirvastava from MA. How does Indian literature examine the psychological impact on cultural clashes and the conflict between traditional and modern values on individuals and communities?
Very wide question, and probably it will take days to answer this in full. See, the conflict is a perennial theme in literature, first thing. It could be conflict between individual and society, between tradition and modernity, and this never ends. This will always go on. Take it from me. Now, how Indian literature does it, that's the question. Well, you see, the making of a novel centers around a problem, right? That's the structure. The logos is some issue has to be there, some problem has to be there, and that problem gets resolved or maybe leads to open end as per writer's choice. So he has to show some kind of development. There are actions, of course, characters involved, issue getting resolved, seemingly resolved, or maybe takes a direction in which it will be resolved in future, that kind of thing. So whatever problem it is, whether it is of tradition versus modernity or any other problem, that is perforce taken up in literature. Literature actually cannot avoid it if it has to be relevant. So in our times, there are myriad issues. Today we are talked of only psychological issues. There are socio-political issues. There are economic problems. There are cultural problems. There are problems related to our conflicts based on caste, creed, religion, region. Okay, so many of them. And a writer living in our times naturally confronts them and chooses something out of that to deal with. Okay, so this is an ongoing phenomenon, and if you want to know exactly which writer is undertaking what, then I can suggest you my book, maybe the latest one, which is on Indian English fiction 2001 to 2020. It's available everywhere on Amazon also. So that deals with 1400 works, 1400 novels, which were published by Indians during these 20 years. And they have been categorized in almost 20 or more categories. I've given you an idea of this. It could be individual, socio-cultural, it could be travel, it could be crime, it could be thriller, it could be science, it could be biographical, it could be graphic. So all these categories are there. And there are comments on at least 400 of novels as to what they deal with. The theme is encapsulated in one sentence or maybe one paragraph, depending on the worth of the novel. So it's very difficult to relate it all here. In case my camera were working, I could have probably shown it also to you, but unfortunately it's not allowed, this particular system, even though I use MS Teams for my classroom also, but then somehow it has not synced well with the ID address that you've given. Anyway, so that would be my answer to this. Are you satisfied with this, or do you want something more? Hello?
Does
Yes,
it
sir.
answer? Completely satisfied with that. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
So there is a question from Mantasha Azim of MA. Her question is, are there any modern literary works that you find particularly compelling in their exploration of individual psychology?
Well, we have taken up some today in our lecture. And if there were time, I could have probably taken up some more also. I had actually at least two more works. One was a story by Jhumpa Lahiri. Another was, there were two plays by Mesh Datani also. I could have talked of them. Now, as I said earlier, there are definitely a number of works. And I've given you a hint also that if you take up a novel pertaining to any category, then there would be conflict, and wherever there is conflict, a good novelist would definitely go into the mind of the characters. That will become psychological itself. It would be psychological approach, right? We talk of diasporic fiction, for example. There is an Indian based in America, living in America, or let's say the recent novel that I read was, it was Benjamin's novel. The title is probably Pleasure Days, something like that. There is a Pakistani family situated in an Arab country, probably Qatar it is. So there happens to be revolution, just as it happened in many other countries at that time. It was called Arab Spring. Now the people from this family, they are serving the royalty there, and people are rising against royalty. So whosoever is with royalty is against the people. That is how it is seen. This family, actually, many of them in the security agencies. So they are into security, and therefore they are siding with the Shah or the whosoever is the monarchy there. It's not given clearly there who is the monarch. So they become uh, kind of detestable people for the general public, and they feel threatened over there. Now, naturally, they think as to what happened. Why are we being singled out? After all, we are here only serving here and we are earning a livelihood. Why should they be looking? We are with them, of course, but the people won't understand that. There's a psychological thing here. Social psychology is at play. Okay, individual also there are within the family also there are things happening. Okay, they are taken to modernity, they are considered a family, but then one of the ladies is hooked on to Facebook somehow. She also starts meeting an old friend of hers via Facebook. So there is some kind of change also happening, and she tries to hide it from others. So the others, someone else comes to know. So there's again psychological play also. So when any novel you take up, it can't be bereft of some psychological touch if it is a good novel. If it is a simple, time pass kind of novel that you pick up while you go by train or bus or plane from one destination to another in the span of 2, 3, 4 hours, and you take up a novel and finish it, that's all. So that kind of popular fiction may not deal so seriously with an issue. But in case it is from a valued author, it's a serious kind of fiction, definitely what makes it serious is that it has that kind of psychological approach to the characters. It has that in-depth study of the problem that it discusses there. There is some hint of solution maybe. There is some comment on the status quo, whatever it is. So all these things would be found there in serious fiction. Okay. More of it, of course, I have referred to the book. Also, there are several other books also, of course, I am sure. But this one is the latest. That's why I'm speaking about it.
Okay, sir. I would like to conclude this question answer session with the question of mine. So the
Please.
question is, how does psychology in literature foster empathy, tolerance, and social harmony for sustainable development goals?
Wonderful question. Sustainable development goals. How do we sustain the society? And you've given the answer yourself through empathy, which is lacking in our times. One is at the throat of the other, all over the world. You see, which country is not fighting with any other country today? And we don't know when the World War III will begin. Only empathy is lacking. That's the problem. Okay, the Palestinians don't
Okay.
want Jews to be on the earth, and the Jews, definitely would like to carve out niche for themselves. They won't like Palestinians, so that is the kind of thing. Russia won't like Ukrainians, or Ukrainians won't like this, etc., etc. So if we can have empathy, and the fact is that we are lying low on emotions and sentiments in this technological era. That is the main problem. Who can arouse sentiments? It's literature only. Religion is under fire, okay, because of certain misdeeds being committed in the name of religion. What else can you look up to? It is literature actually which teaches the lesson of humanity to the readers. Literature can be in any form. It can be in book form also. It can be in visual form also. It can be in the form of movies also. That's also literature. But main thing is this is the only hope for mankind. If we arouse the emotional self in us, that will only find resonance with others, that will only see the same worth of another human being as we assign to ourselves. In the spiritual language, it is seeing the divinity in every being or non-being also. So we have lost that sense of, recognizing divinity in others also. We lost the sense of, attaching the same value as we attach to ourselves. And that is basically what empathy teaches you to do. And literature is the best means for it.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You are on mute, Dr. Binu.
Binu ma'am, you're not audible.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for answering the questions of our dear students in an enthusiastic manner and in a very patiently. You gave the answers. That is remarkable, and it was a very informative session and great lecture given by you. So we are really glad to hear you today, and we the teachers of Department of English, I, Dr. Sugandha, Medha, Dr. Tulika, we really thank you that you spare your time and share your wisdom to our past participants and to us. Thank you so much, sir, to being with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have this kind of responsive audience and brilliant and intelligent people in front of me. I really wish I was there with you, but least of all we could do probably to have camera on in my case, which has not happened. I really regret it. Even though I'm not kind of person to be looked at. Still would have been good. Well, anyway, some other time, and I look forward to those times. Thank you so much once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, once again.
Thank you.
Once again, I want to thank you, all the organizing team, all the participants and the students, and of course the volunteers. Thank you so much, all of you, to make the session that grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, all the participants are requested to please look at the chat box. The feedback link has been pasted. You please fill the feedback form, and after that, you can leave the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and bye for now. Thank you.
Bye, sir. Bye
Thank
bye.
you so much. Bye.